All right, welcome back, everybody. Got Justice, Joel, and Mike here with me. Continue the conversation. I want to pick up on something actually both of you all said. You said we find our tribes on social media, like black men cry, we fish, we run, we swim, that you mentioned. But you're talking about this idea. We do other stuff too. But yeah, we do all this, but we also cry. Right? You're talking about we cry, and you were talking about this idea, these safe spaces we can get in there and not necessarily be judged, but don't we have something sometimes to overcome in our own tribe?
Yeah, absolutely, TJ. Like, I mean, we can look at, and Mike, you kind of touched on it, like this, and it's separate thoughts, but when we talk about trauma porn, it exists because there's trauma, right? There's trauma, there's ancestral trauma that I think we're still trying to unpack. Like, slavery wasn't that long ago. Like, us being able to vote, like, that's mad new. That's not like a thing that just happened like 1,000 years ago. And so, like, I think we're in a place now where we're learning how to talk with each other. You know, I think so much of the conversations, especially as black men and those who identify as such, has been like, yo, you need to get right and do this, or you need to do this and show up in this way. And I feel like a lot of the conversations I've been having with my brothers and non-binary folks alike has been more about, okay, what do you need from me in this space right now, and how can I show up for you? Like empathy, you know, but like in order to get to that place, like therapy, like there's a lot of unpacking that we haven't had the opportunity to do also too, because when you look at a young brother like Amir Locke, who's 22, who's murdered, right? He didn't have the opportunity or the chance to like sift through the things that he probably would have gotten to at 39, right, or 45. You know, like brothers are dying so young and so early. Like and a lot of that, the trauma that doesn't get unprocessed, it sits with us.
You know, something in particular there, there's something you've written about, this idea of walking around as a black man always wondering when death is coming for you, right? This idea that, I mean, I don't know how much you all think about it, but do you think about, I don't know who else has to do this, think about how you're going to die, what age you're going to die.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Why would it, you're 23 years old. Why in God's name would you be thinking about that? Why am I sitting at 44 years old for years of my life? Like, is this how I'm going to go out?
Yeah. I guess two things. I had that experience as a black man and also as a femme-presenting black person. I think there's two different ways. It's like, okay, I could be killed by this like external force, may it be like police and whatever, but then also there is like that internal fear as well of being in black spaces and being a femme person and being like, oh, there can be violence inflicted on me in this space as well. And I think to deal with that, there's also privilege that I've been able to radically accept it, which is really a weird like phrase, but I think that's like privilege of like being in the spaces that I'm in. But for me, that's where I'm at.
But that's constant stress and trauma. Who has to walk? We need a collective group black male therapy in this country. Like it's hard to get anybody to understand that constant stress to walk through. And we all got these stories, but I've done this before in the pandemic, walking through Times Square when it was shut down, nobody's supposed to be out. And I see two cops in the distance, 20, 30, 40 feet away. And I see them, and automatically I hold up my suit bag and start pointing and say, I'm going to work. Why? That's an automatic. I didn't stop and think, I see a cop, he sees me, let me make sure like that is a trauma. How are we dealing with that trauma if folks outside that are giving us that trauma and stress don't understand or respect it?
TJ, I am always the glass is half full. And that is a subject matter where I am always the glass is half empty.
Okay.
I don't think we're ever going to have to deal with that. We all have our stories. That comes up to me when I'm around white women in private spaces. If I'm like alone on a street, I see a white woman ahead of me, I actually get nervous because I'm like, at any minute, when is she gonna cry foul? When will the tears come? When I enter my apartment buildings at night, I'm always cognizant if I'm going to go into this elevator or if I'm going to go into this corridor or this hallway at 2 a.m. with a white woman, how is that going to impact my safety in my life? Why is that? Because we have so much historical context and data and murders of black men falsely accused, falsely charged, hung, dragged by pickup trucks at the mere mention of a white woman crying foul. That is something I cannot unlock out of my head. That is what gives me actually more fear than the police itself.
It's like well, TJ, when you're talking about the bag, I remember I used to live in the Upper East Side, and right before I would hit 79th and First, I would pull my keys out just because I wanted people to know that I lived here.
Yeah.
Like, I needed people to know, like, hey, I'm not dropping off something at the bodega. I'm not the mail guy. I actually live in this building, so please don't. And like, it becomes part of our routine. So like, to the point that if you're not examining the trauma, you just sit with it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a thing that we haven't yet unpacked, because I think, and TJ, I think you bring such an important point. It's become so part of almost like the way we show up in the world. That we take it as a thing that just is, right? So if it just is, you're not inspecting it from a bird's eye lens of like, oh, do I need to unpack it?
Yeah.
You know?
I also wonder, like, do we just sit with it or do we pass it on?
Ooh, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Because I feel like so often, even talking about like black fatherhood, I feel like I've inherited some of my father's trauma, most definitely. My dad's a great person, but I definitely had to carry that. And I think that is one thing, like we talk about like black manhood and blackness in general, one thing we have to figure out is how we can dissolve this trauma and not push it onto other people. Especially like, for example, if we're talking about black men, like who are their therapists? Black women.
Joseph, if I can add to that just a little bit, and I'm going to come from where you came from a little bit earlier, because I love how you always come from this duality kind of perspective, and how you said to separate, which was beautifully said, masculinity from manhood. I think when we talk about trauma with that, I think we have to separate intergenerational trauma of mental that we bring onto ourselves versus external forces that we just can't control. Right? Because there's some things that we just can't control, how a person will feel and cry foul in the elevator at 2 a.m. Like, we just can't. No matter how many keys I pull out, no matter how much I even welcome it into my apartment to show what it looks like, no matter how much I tell them how much I pay, no matter how much I tell what my salary is, like, I just can't control those factors. So I think there are some things that are inherently passed down, and I think sometimes this is just part of the as is and as it will be to what we were discussing.
But the as is, you said it, and I wanted to stop you when you said it. You said we have to find a way to get out of this path. What is that way? Is it just time? Do we need to just, maybe it takes a couple generations. Maybe it takes that kind of time, but in the meantime, what?
I think, just to go back to the thing of talking about the duality there, I think even with the external forces of like, this could happen walking down the street with this white woman, there still has to be a way to, I guess, transfer that energy, because I don't even know if it's generational trauma. Like, I even find myself where when I'm with my loved ones, okay, something like traumatic happens on the street, or like I've like been around a microaggression. Like, how do I navigate that like traumatic energy and not make it affect my like personal life?
You
know, and I guess like therapy, but that still is like privilege. I don't know.
But I think it goes back, and like, it's when you talk about finding like the village, right? Like on social media and community, it's like you said something earlier that made me think about this too, and it kind of almost going back to what you talked about earlier, TJ, as far as like external, internal. I think the internal community is the biggest part. Like, for me, to be quite and completely honest, I could care less about the white gays or like what the white community is going to do, because they don't care. My job is to protect my people in that way. Now, I can also hold two things to be true at that same time. Like, I can respect and love a white community and hold space for conversation while recognizing my priority is this. So how can I nurture this? And part of that is therapy is such a privilege, but like, what are my therapeutic models, right? So like, is it me? Is it me, Justice, Mike, and TJ having a good old conversation in a bar or on a panel? Is it me connecting with my brother and just asking and checking in with him and asking him, like, how was your heart today? You know, like, how are we giving black men the space and freedom to just say, this is what I'm going through, and not only sit with that, but then also let's maybe unpack it in a way that's going to make you feel safe so you don't carry that with you onto the next place or community you engage with.
If I can lean into that just a little bit, and to what both of you are saying is brilliant, because even myself, right? Like, I'm in the therapy, I do tons of self-care, aromatherapy, I do cigar walks with my homies in Brooklyn. Yeah. I travel, I vacation with white people, right? Like, I'm around, you know what I mean? Like, this isn't, and
how
this
did you
statement,
make the cut for this panel?
I was looking through
I know, right? Plot twist.
How did you
plot twist.
Security.
Yeah, this isn't being anti-white, right? This is just talking about your lived experiences, right? But all those things that I'm doing, right? And I think we need to, and that's what we were talking about earlier, TJ, that you brought up so brilliantly, like, to do these things to make sure that we do get through the day. But unfortunately for me, doing all those things, I can't help but get the microaggressions that I get on a constant, consistent basis. And you constantly have to ask yourself, is this happening because I'm black, right? Like, it happens to me on a daily basis. When I have a microaggression, I have to think about it. But I guess thank God for therapy, the cigars, the aromatherapy, the vacations, and the whole nine. Like, I don't carry it with me throughout the entire day. But it does disrupt your day for a moment. And I think that is what you were talking about in your question, is that there still is a disruption in your day. At least for me, I'm human.
But I think, Mike, but part of that, real quick, TJ, I think part of that is, like, the trauma isn't going to go anywhere. No. Like, even when we've been through therapy, we know this process. Like, the trauma doesn't just dissipate. Like, oh, I'm done. Like, because there's always going to be this constant threat of unfortunate violence, whether it's emotional, physical. But I think part of the work for us gets to be, and what I've learned through and through, is, like, we just want to lessen the effect of the trigger, right? So, like, the microaggression is going to show itself. It's always going to, it's like, did you put the change on the counter instead of putting it in my hand because you don't like me? Because you mad at Will Smith? Like, don't come at me. You know what I'm saying? Like, but maybe it's not that. My job isn't to sit down and try to unpack the microaggression. My job is to, like, create space here to be able to say, okay, this thing happened. How can I continue on with my day to ensure that I can continue to put empathy, love, and intention first and foremost?
You know, I didn't have for this panel, I didn't have a section, and we didn't have of the show that was meant for this and these stories. But to be quite honest with you, it's therapeutic. To share the stories and to hear, well, I know we're all going through and we've had these moments and these issues daily, and somebody on this panel will have another one today.
Yes.
But you know, it felt good to just let it ride. So I appreciate that.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.